Hogan in the house, and we are going to ask her all of our questions. Kelly Hogan is a 13-year strict carnivore, correct?
12 and a half. It'll be 13 years in October, but yes, close enough.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. And we already have some questions, but first of all, I'm going to ask you to give our audience a little bit of a background just for my audience to be more familiarized. And then I have a question about stretch marks, which I thought was very interesting because I was teaching my morning class and I was telling them I'm doing an IG live, and we went over to your Instagram and I showed them the transformation. And that post, you were talking about how you never had to have any surgery after dropping 120 pounds, which I think is mind blowing. So if you can give us a little bit of a background, and then the stretch mark thing, I'm going to ask you that, and then we'll dive into the questions that were submitted.
Yes. Also, I'm just drinking hot water this morning. It is freezing in here. And so, yeah, hold on. Okay.
Take your time.
Hot mug. They
Yeah.
have silver tea, right? Just really hot water. Okay. So, I had kind of a good childhood, like free from trauma. I was picked on just a little bit because I was heavy set, but that was like the worst of it. I was just chunkier than most kids, but fairly healthy, a lot of strep throat and that kind of stuff. That's about it. Then I went off to college and I gained a lot of weight. And even in high school, in order to not gain weight, I had to really calorie restrict. So every year for prom, I would go on some crazy diet trying to lose weight, and it would work for a while. Then I would gain back even more. Then I went to college and gained about 50 pounds while I was there. So I was about 250 pounds by the time I graduated college at age 22. And I started teaching. I was a music teacher. I got married at age 23. Kept gaining weight. So by age 25, I no longer felt all that healthy though. I had started getting boils, deep boils that had to be lanced and drained and packed by a doctor repeatedly. So it was on mostly my thighs. It was terrible, so painful. I would get large patches of cellulitis in my legs where it was like, I was hobbling around like a 90-year-old and I was 25.
Wow. Yeah.
The doctor said, look, it's not just about weight at this point. You're going to die in early death if you don't lose 100 pounds. And I was like, I've tried. I didn't know. I really had. I just didn't know how to lose 100 pounds. And so he told me flat out, and this was in 2004. I was so lucky to have found this guy. And he was old school. Well, old and old school, both. Said, it's the carbohydrates. And I was like, well, I've heard of carbohydrates, but I don't really know what that means. And so in 2004, he taught me exactly what to avoid. He told me to eat quote, all the meat you want. In 2004, he said that to me. So when people say, how did you figure out carnivore in 2004? Which if anybody's doing, that is more than 12 and a half years ago. That was 17 years ago. And that's when I went almost carnivore, but I was including a lot of artificial sweeteners back then. So I don't really count that as total carnivore, but it really, it did a lot for my health. Even just meat, a little bit of veg, and some artificial sweeteners still did a lot. I didn't get another boil after that. So it wasn't until 2009 and I stuck to my all meat, very little veg, and artificial sweetener diet for 5 years. And in 2009, I met real carnivores who were like, you're still using sweeteners? And I was like, I didn't even know. It says carbs 0. How is this bad? And they're like, aren't you having cravings? I said, for sugar? Yes, all day, every day. Is that bad? And it was bad. I just didn't know it was fixable. And so that's when Charles Washington, Dana Spencer Shute, Dr. Lisa Wiedemann, Amber O'Hearn, we were all there in this big zero carb forum together. And that's when they taught me to get rid of cravings, you got to get rid of sweet taste. And I did. And the next 12 and a half years were much easier, much easier.
Wow. So really, even more than 12 and a half years, if you start counting from 2004, you really had a big shift in your diet. It wasn't 100% strict, but still,
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh, huge. And, you know, some people today would consider those 5 years even carnivore, but it felt so completely different. I can't even call that carnivore. I felt
Wow.
so much better after 2009 when I went. Also, in 2009, I started eating much more fat. I did not really appreciate, nobody had told me the fat's really important. So I was still
Yeah.
doing my 1990s lower fat approach.
Yes. We've been
Not,
traumatized. Yeah.
not as good.
No. So, the only thing that was different that that gave you the lack of cravings and you felt a complete shift is removing the artificial sweeteners. Was there anything else that you were still including and completely eliminated and felt this way?
Well, in 2004, when I started, I was still having green beans, pickles, like the really lowest carb veggies. But over the
Right.
5 years, I really don't like vegetables. So I had really stopped eating them. And so by the time I found out what carnivore even was, I was only having meat, sugar-free Jello. I don't know why I picked that. It said carb zero. I know it's just a bulk of chemicals and dyes. That's what I'm saying, not carnivore. And diet soda. So that's where
Right.
when I discovered, oh, there's a name for what I think I want to do. And they called themselves zero carbers at the time. They didn't even call themselves carnivores. And that not even, now we sometimes say zero carb carnivores. No, they just called it zero carb.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I visited that forum way, way back before carnivore was a thing and everybody was talking about it on YouTube. And I remember reading about your story. And it wasn't until years later that it all clicked again. And I remembered, oh my God, I read her story on that forum, like late at night, sometime after some sugary binge, you know, I'm like, what am I gonna do? And I'm like online searching for answers. So thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And everybody who's joining us, thank you for joining us. We're doing an Instagram live with the one and only Kelly Hogan. So send all of your questions and I can see them. So, but before we start answering them, I want to ask you this question. Why do you think you were able to lose 120 pounds on a carnivore diet without requiring any form of surgery or having any kind of loose skin? I mean, this is unheard of.
Okay. Well, unheard of for most ways people lose weight. If you calorie restrict and do it like the old school Biggest Loser way, they typically up looking deflated. But here's what people really need to know. Okay, in addition to if you eat lots of protein and fat and plenty of calories as you are losing weight, you aren't going to eat away at your lean mass as much as if you are eating properly, right? If you are fueling yourself well, you're going to keep your lean mass. That's what I'm trying to say, and not look as deflated. However,
Right.
I don't care what you eat. If you lose 120 pounds, there will be loose skin. I've had 3 babies and I've lost weight. There was loose skin. There was loose skin for years. I don't mean people, how many months did it take? No, years. And I have heard 3-year carnivores say, well, I know some people get rid of their loose skin, but I know that will never be me. No, you don't. No, you don't, because at 3 years, I still had loose skin. Listen, this is 12 and a half years. It's just gotten better. So yeah, I could grab all kinds of skin. That's going to happen when you lose weight. But if you stick with something for year after year after year, and it's fueling your body properly, you're getting on the nutrients you need, skin really can tighten up. I know that age plays a part, genetics plays a part, but diet really does too. And the biggest component, I think, is time. You can't expect the same results at 3 years as 13. It's just not the same. And I tell people, I know you're frustrated right now. Keep doing it for a decade if you feel good, and then come see me and tell me about your loose skin, because I almost guarantee you it will be better. I've seen it happen for a lot of people.
Right. So your advice would be patient. Don't rush to your surgeon right away. and just take your time, because there's a good chance that if you're eating your species appropriate diet, that it's just going to fix itself. It's going to get better and better and better.
Yes, and it may never be perfect. I still have a loose tush. It's not great. You couldn't bounce a dime off of this thing. It's okay though. I wouldn't take back the 120 pounds for anything. And I still have faith that I think it's going to get better, you know, as long as I stick with it. Now, that said, if somebody can afford to have the skin removed and they don't want to wait several years, okay. I couldn't afford it. I really couldn't. So I had no choice but to just eat my meat and be patient. And now, of course, I'm glad I saved my money.
Of course. So they're asking us about whether or not you eat dairy and heavy cream.
Okay. Also, by the way, my screen is completely frozen as far as the comments go. So you move. We look fine. We look good, girl.
Yeah.
But comments, I can't read them. It's stuck. I go through periods where I do include more dairy than others. For the past few months, I limit myself to dairy. And I'm talking pasteurized dairy. Here in North Carolina, I can't just go and buy a bunch of raw dairy. Or I probably would try. To 5 days per month. So, you know, I figure if I keep it to about once per week, I do well. And I do mark it down on my fridge when because my addicted brain can convince myself, you haven't had it that much. But then I look at the chart and I'm like, yep, there it is. My 5 days are gone.
Oh, okay.
Because my skin will break out if I have a lot of pasteurized dairy. So,
me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common. And also, I feel like physique-wise, I just look better and feel better, and I don't have a drippy nose. If I have a lot of dairy, I get stuffy, fluffy, and bumpy.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I feel like that happens to me as well when I include dairy, like the drippy nose a little bit. Yep. That's so strange. And that makes sense because it increases mucus production, and somehow, I guess maybe also some inflammation goes up, and that leads to that. So what about whether or not, that was like the first question that was sent our way. What about macros? Do you track macros? Because a lot of our audience is very apprehensive about that, or it's just too much work, you know?
Yeah, so I didn't track anything for the entire time I was losing 120 pounds. That's not how I did it. It was literally, for me, and I'm not everybody, but for me, it was as simple as cut out all the carbs, replace it with animal products, have a nice day. I mean, I wasn't sitting in ice baths. I didn't know to focus on the sun. I had never even heard of seed oil, so I wasn't thinking about it. Obviously, I wasn't drowning my burger patties in like vegetable oil though. Right. So some of those things happened naturally. I did start to move more, but partly because I felt like moving more. But no, I didn't know to focus on a macro. But why does it matter for some people? Well, for one thing, if I had known about macros, I probably wouldn't have spent 5 years eating low-fat carnivore and feeling like not so good. So if is feeling not so good, that's when I feel like, okay, maybe it's time to tweak something. If somebody's losing weight and feeling great and they're sleeping well and their sex life is awesome, I'm like, please don't track anything except maybe like per week you're getting laid. Like maybe that's it. You don't need to track everything if it's going great. But when somebody's struggling, then I'll say, do you have any idea how many calories you're eating per day? Because under eating is so common. Do you have any idea what percentage of your calories are coming from fat? Because 60 to 80 is where most people fall, closer to like 70% for most carnivores who aren't trying to do one way. If a carnivore's trying to eat lean, it tends to be about 60% from fat, of calories from fat. And if somebody's trying to eat high fat, it tends to be about 80%. But you have to kind of work to make it that way. And so even if you are trying, I've seen some people say, I mean, almost weekly, somebody will say, I stopped eating so much fat and I can tell a difference in my body. I'm losing weight. And I'm like, oh, wow. But no joke. Equally as much. I was saying, I bumped up my fat macros and now I'm suddenly losing weight. And I'm like, oh, that's great, because it really does happen both ways for people. And I've even experimented with switching it up a lot, like having super high fat days and then having a much leaner carnivore day, and then better body recomp for myself. But even that became like a hassle. And if I want ribs any day, I just want to eat them. So it depends on if you're struggling, I would tweak something. If you're, not losing weight like you'd want, or want to experiment just to see if something works better, play with it. Unless you're going below 60%, you're probably going to be okay. And also the main thing is, as long as you're willing to adjust when you don't feel okay. So if somebody is trying 60% fat calories and they don't feel great, okay, then don't do that. You need to increase, especially if you have mental health concerns. You may need much higher fat than that. But as long as you're adaptable to what your body's telling you, play around. I don't see any harm in that.
Exactly. And also, even before you dig into the macros, I mean, just overall, like a quick overview of the amount of calories that you're taking in can cue you in if you're doing tons of fat or not enough fat, all those kinds of things. And you can just use that as a general overview, although there's really not too much of a need when you focus so much on the quality of the food you're putting in your body. It kind of takes care of itself, don't you think?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I used to calorie count before carnivore a lot and was sure to have a deficit, and it didn't matter. I mean, I could lose weight for a while and then it would come back. Like, it didn't matter. And now I don't have to worry about it. I eat until I'm comfortably full and then just go about my day, and I don't have to just stress about weight anymore.
Amazing. Let me see. I have so many questions that are popping up. Lawson and Cruzen is asking us, have you had any negative results in blood work since changing to carnivore? I'm just starting and worried about cholesterol and blood pressure.
Yeah, my blood pressure is great. 100/60 is almost dead on that every time I go. It depends who you ask. The doctor I went and saw last, I've only been there once, and I probably won't go back. Well, also I moved away, so I really won't be back. He at one point said that my LDL was high. It had crossed the threshold of 100, and I was like, oh, well, that's okay with me. And like, that's a concern. I mean, statistically, it's not a concern, and we know that. Everything else on my blood work, I've had nutrients tested, not in the past couple of years, but at like my 10-year carniversary, I wanted everything tested. And I had a doctor who was willing to do that. My original doctor has now retired, so that's a bummer. He was so supportive. He would let me test everything, and he never had one deficiency. Even total cholesterol, my total cholesterol stays 180 to 220-ish. So mine never went crazy. But my main thing when there's a new carnivore asking about lab work is please wait a little while. I don't care what diet somebody is starting. If for the first 6 months or so, 3 to 6 months, things go haywire and it can make people panic. Also, you can get your lab work checked every single day for the first few months, and every day is going to look different because it's just all over the place. So I say, let the chips fall for a while and then go get it checked when things have settled down. And also, lab work is crazy when you're losing weight, period. When your body is getting rid of body fat, lab work is all over the place. So it's just not a great time to get it checked. And it's not because I feel like, oh, they're going to see how bad it is. No, it's inaccurate for a while is what it is. And at 6 months, people have normally said, oh, it balanced out, looks much better.
Wonderful. There you go. That's a great answer that I haven't heard before about this initial transitional phase, but that makes total sense. And for everybody asking, yes, I will make sure that I save our lives, so do not worry. Do you have to eat seafood or take fish oil to get all nutrients needed?
Well, I didn't for like a decade of carnivore. So for about 10 years, I just pretty much ate burger patties. And I mean like 95% probably of my diet was burger for 10 years. And at the end of that 10 years, that's when I had my doctor do all of my nutrients, all of my like in-depth blood work. Could not find a single problem. CRP score 0.5. My insulin now is 1.8. A1C stays just below 5. Like everything is really good, and that's burger patties. However, in the last couple of years, you know, you start to hear people say, oh, to get those omega-3s and 6s, it's a great idea to add in fish. And I was like, I mean, I don't hate fish. It's not a burden to do it. So I started eating a little more, but it started off as like twice per week. Here lately, it has been 0 times per week, but or more occasionally, you know, a couple times maybe. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I also eat eggs, and I think it's, you know, you're going to get a more well-rounded nutrient profile, I think, if you have some beef, maybe a little butter, an egg here or there, some fish. I don't think there's any harm in it unless you're sensitive to those foods, of course.
Exactly. Okay. Losin and Cruisin, another question. What is your feeling about processed meats like pepperoni and deli meats?
Okay, so I think for most carnivores, okay, for myself, and what I hear pretty often is, I'm not afraid to eat it occasionally. So if I'm in a hurry, my kids eat quite a bit of deli meat, like roll-ups, meat and cheese roll-ups. They take that for lunch, for school. And if I'm here at the house, I'll roll some up if I'm in a hurry and just need a little bite of something. And I might do that for one meal, but then I'll definitely make sure that the next meal is fresh meat. So I don't trust it to live off of it, but I'm also not afraid to have it once in a while. If you are a person who tends to have high uric acid levels or any issues, concerns with gout, I wouldn't touch it. Not even like ham, because I have known carnivores, adapted carnivores, who would get gout flare-ups from processed meats. Yes. So I wouldn't do it in that case. Also, some people with histamine issues should stick to fresh meats. But if you're feeling good and in general you're pretty healthy, and once in a while, like the worst thing to do is you buy some deli meat and eat it, I think that's probably okay.
Yeah, definitely better than a cupcake, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh.
For a quick snack, for sure. Some of the questions that were submitted, okay, this is the macros thing. I guess we answered it, which is great. So what is a typical eating day and how much protein do you recommend? I guess we can focus on your typical eating day recently.
Yeah, so I usually eat about a pound of meat for lunch and a pound of meat for dinner. I am not normally hungry till around 11 or 11:30 when I eat my lunch. So if I do wake up hungry, I'll have a few eggs, but that's not very often, usually on a Saturday maybe if I'm, you know, scrambling eggs and eating with them. But typically about 2 pounds of meat per day. Now I say that, but if I'm having pork belly, I cannot eat 2 pounds of pork belly. I mean, I would be sick. So it really depends on what I'm eating. You'll get more calories in 1 pound of pork belly than in 2 pounds of burger patties. Like 500 calories more, actually. I looked it up the other day because somebody was asking me the same question, how many pounds of meat per day? And I'm like, well, what kind of meat are we talking about? If it's burger patties, 2 pounds. If it's steak, about 2 pounds. If it's pork belly, not even close. I can't.
Interesting. And do you feel like on the days when you're more physically active that fluctuates a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So when we first moved here, I was painting all day and walking the dog and moving furniture, and I was just ravenous. So for sure, I might stick to the 2 pounds of meat per day, but then before bed, eat 5 strips of bacon and some hard-boiled eggs. You know, like I just have to adjust for that.
Of course. And I have a good question that I actually want to hear the answer to more than anything. Was there ever a time that you ever cheated and ate carbs since turning to carnivore?
Okay. I do get asked that a lot. So usually it's phrased like this: have you ever cheated? And I used to say, and this is true, I have cheated twice with plants on carnivore. Both times I was pregnant. I would say that's not an excuse, but it kind of was. I was just dying for pickles. When I was pregnant with Julia, I ate some pickles. And then with Annie, which was my third baby, I had peanuts. I got really itchy with the peanuts. I didn't really feel any negative effects from the pickles, but once I got that sort of out of my system and I got them, I was probably craving like the salt and vinegar, but all I knew was I had to have a pickle like now. And I felt so like stereotypical. Oh my God, I can't believe that. Yes. Okay. So people mean, have I had sugar since I started even 17 years ago? Not even once. Like, I don't play with sugar. It'd be like a recovered cocaine addict. I'd be like, you don't go back. I'm not going back. So as for artificial sweeteners, I have not had a single bit since 2009. Now I have a new interpretation of the question, though, have I cheated? And it's partly because I'm taking the certification program with Dr. Ifland to become a food addiction recovery advocate. And now I see that there are so many different ways to, quote, cheat. As far as like, have I ever binged since starting carnivore and eaten way more than I needed for my body? Yes. Have I cheated and had dairy even though I know it isn't the best choice for me? Yes. Have I ever had seed oils? Well, I've gone out for chicken wings. That wasn't at Buffalo Wild Wings. And so, yes. Have I ever had gluten in 17 years? Well, I think once, but it was the other day and it was sort of accidental. My mom had put some sauce on some meat. I ended up having horrible leg cramps. I was like, what was on the meat? No, nothing. Just some barbecue with wheat flour in it.
Your mom, after all these years.
Yes, she had originally made the barbecue for someone else, and it was a very like clear sauce, as in it didn't look sauced. So I'm just coming along and I was like, yay, ribs. I had no idea. So it's not about perfection, is what I guess I'm getting at. Have I made any mistakes through the years? Yes, it wasn't with sugar, but I'm not perfect. And it's really about just getting better than we were and trying to be as consistent as we can to feel the best that we can. I don't think at the end of my life, I'm going to be like, goodbye, sweet world. I'm so glad I never cheated. I think it's going to be more like, I'm so glad I felt good while I was here. And if I hadn't done that, I think on my deathbed, I would probably wish I had felt better and lived longer. I can't imagine what my life would be like right now if I hadn't changed at age 25 or at some point along the way. What would I be like now? I'm 43 now. I don't know what, I was in bad shape in my 20s, so I can't, it's hard for me to even imagine. But you know, it's not like I have a cheat wall where I go and put like a tally mark. Oh no, I messed up. Like there's so many different variations of not being perfect, but I don't really think it's best to focus on that. Probably just on being the best that we can today so that we feel the best that we can feel.
Exactly. That's awesome. Great. Okay. Eunice, I get to day 2 or 3, and then I struggle to face meat, and I love meat. I don't eat pork and shellfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear a lot of people who start carnivore in the first few days, they're just so happy to be eating some meat and fat, and it tastes so good, and they're like gobbling it up. And I remember that feeling of euphoria. And then something happens, and I call it like your brain's final temper tantrum for the substance, for the carbs and the sugar. And it comes out as meat aversions for a lot of people, where they say, I cannot look at another steak. And so I tell them, okay, don't. First of all, there's a wide world of carnivore products. If the only thing they can handle is omelets, have some omelets. If the only thing they can handle is burger patties with some mustard or hot sauce to cover up the fact that it tastes like meat, do it. I know about meat aversions because I had them for 3 pregnancies. My first trimester, and I was fully carnivore before I ever got pregnant the first time. All 3 pregnancies, the entire first trimester. If it tasted like meat, I couldn't handle it. And it was awful. It was awful. So I was fine with bacon. I was fine with sausage, eggs, cheese, hot sauce, but it couldn't taste like a steak, which had been my favorite food before I got pregnant. It was like my brain was just transferred with somebody. So I feel for people who have meat aversions. And I think one way to deal with it is to sort of baby yourself through it. Like I was describing, if it's a carnivore casserole, cheesy, saucy, anything that tastes good, just do that. It typically lasts about a week, unless you're pregnant. Most people say that by the end of a week, that they are fine with going back to more meaty, steaky meals, and you just have to power through it. The other thing people can do is say to themselves, if I am not hungry for meat, I am not hungry, so I'm going to fast for a little while. I'm not a huge advocate of forced fasting, but if somebody literally can't eat meat, I'm not hungry. And so just don't eat for a few days. It will pass. Your body will not reject real nutrition for long. It's just, you know, in drug rehabilitation centers, you hear people who stop eating while they're going through drug withdrawals. I think it's similar. Your body only wants what it wants, and it's sugar in that moment. That doesn't mean it's what's best. It just means you're an addict and you're going through withdrawals. So after a few days, normally it seems like 4 to 7 days, people come back and say, okay, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm famished. Give me the steaks.
I'll take all the steak, please.
Exactly. Liz NGIO, do you drink any alcohol? I think I know the answer to that one, but we're asking you, do you drink any alcohol?
I don't talk about alcohol a lot because I don't feel like anyone out there thinks it's a health food or is going to do you any benefit whatsoever. There, to my knowledge, is no reason health-wise to drink alcohol. So I don't promote it or discuss it in any way. Plus, I grew up Baptist, and so we don't talk about alcohol. But I'll make an exception for you, Dr. Sarah. Occasionally, my husband, he is an extreme moderator in all things, including alcohol. And alcohol has never been my personal struggle. I can't moderate a cookie to save my life, but alcohol has never had any hold on me whatsoever. So if we're going out on a date night and he has a non-sweetened beverage like bourbon, I will sometimes occasionally partake in that. But again,
it doesn't cause you symptoms or anything like the carbs, right?
Oh, no. If it did, I really would not do it unless it was dairy. So sometimes I will still have dairy. But no, I personally, from one small, I'm blushing right now. I really don't normally talk about it. I don't feel any negative effects from it as an occasional date night thing, which doesn't happen very often, actually.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Okay. How did you handle negativity from friends and family about being on a restrictive diet?
So the first 5 years when it was low carb and I still had some pickles once in a while, everybody was all cool, right? As long as you don't say carnivore diet, it seemed like, wow, Kelly's losing weight, Kelly's not getting boils, Kelly's doing great. And then I did the mistake that I now tell people, be wary of this. No announcements at family meals unless you just want to go there. But I was like, you know what? I discovered that there's this thing called carnivore. And I was telling my parents about it, and they were like, so you're not going to eat green beans anymore? You're not going to have a salad? I'm like, well, I pretty much stopped doing that anyway. And they said, and that's supposed to be healthy? And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, it is supposed to be healthy. So I did have some negativity and pushback. And that took a long time, and it didn't feel good because I love pleasing my parents. I've always been like, just maybe not people pleaser to the whole world, but I really want to make my parents happy. And they weren't thrilled. But also by that point, the difference between where I started 5 years ago and where I was so stark that, I mean, they couldn't argue much at that point. It was like, well, and I told them, if I start feeling worse or bad or anything, I will change, right? And so here we are. It's been 12 and a half more years, and we're all still waiting, and I still feel good. And they're fine. But it's me a hard time.
Yeah. Did you convert any of your close family members or friends to a carnivore lifestyle?
James's family has more carnivores in it than mine. He's not a carnivore. Yeah, his aunt's husband, his first cousin. I'm like, come on. But so my family just went more lower carb. Definitely not carnivore. They still fully believe that they should be having some vegetables. And, you know, it's okay.
It's funny. Your family is always the hardest to convince.
Yes. Yes. So
I don't know why.
A big step in the right direction, though, as far as just lowering sugar and using real butter now. My parents always had margarine in the house. Oh my gosh. So yeah, they've made some steps, but they're not carnivores.
Wow. Yeah. But just the sugar component and the carbohydrate component is still, you're giving them plenty of years just from that little change, you know?
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. You're very welcome, Liz NGIO. Um, okay. Do you eat? Okay, we answered that. Okay, let's see.
Oh,
Oh,
some
there's more.
when
Yeah,
you asked questions, you told me that somebody had asked about budget options. Can we talk about that for a second?
let's do it.
So when I first started Carnivore, not that I'm like, independently wealthy now or anything, but money was much more of a struggle at that point. So, we all know ground beef is going to be way cheaper than ribeyes. I still don't eat ribeyes all that often. If they're on sale, I'll pick them up. But I think people have this conception that carnivores every day are eating ribeyes. No, not really. A lot of ground beef, chuck roast. You can find chuck roast sometimes. I can still, even in today's crazy prices, find them for like $3.99 or $4.99 a pound. If you take a big hunk of chuck roast and cut it into strips and lay it in the air fryer or the skillet or on the grill, it's a steak. It's delicious. To me, it is really, people say, isn't it tough and chewy? If you keep it rare, no, it is delicious and very similar to buying a much more expensive steak. Eggs, if you were to buy, only free range, I know even eggs could add up, but there are really cheap egg options out there. You can still get eggs. Well, I can for like $1.30 for a dozen. Sardines are cheap. Chicken thighs, so cheap. I wrote down a few things. I go to the butcher and ask, do you have any ribeye fat trimmings? And they will give it to me some places for free and other places for like 60 cents per pound of ribeye fat
Wow.
trimming. So you can get a whole chicken these days for about $1 per pound. A whole chicken. That's pretty darn cheap. But this is an even better deal because if you get the chicken leg quarters, so that's the leg and the thigh together. That's $1 per pound typically. But it's better deal because the meat to bone ratio is much better than on a whole chicken. On a whole chicken, you're paying for a whole lot of stuff you can't eat. So chicken leg quarters, that is a deal right there, about $1 per pound. If you go online and search like Health Coach Kate, she's done videos on carnivore for $5 per day. If you were to have a can of sardines, 2 eggs, half a pound of ground beef, 2 tablespoons of butter, and a chicken leg quarter. I added all of that up, not price-wise, but calorie-wise, to give people an idea. Would that be enough for a day? That's 1,743 calories, and eat twice that much if you want. I don't care, but that would be enough for a lot of people, and that would be cheap. I mean, really, really cheap. You could do that for $5.
Wow. I love this breakdown, Kelly. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Rebecca, Parkinson's and neuropathy, any encouragement for these conditions?
Yes, lots of fat on carnivore. I would think the worst things you could do is anything inflammatory, seed oils, carbs, and sugars. Butter has butyrate, the highest source of any food for butyrate is butter, and butter has a huge connection in research with Alzheimer's, stroke, Parkinson's. With the more butyrate in your system, typically the less your chances of having that. So if that were my concern, I think I would stick to very buttery meat products and just,
Awesome.
yeah, and avoid carbs at all costs.
Agreed. And I remember when I was interviewing Dr. Anthony Chafee, and he talks about this all the time. His father had started developing Parkinson's and then put him on a carnivore diet, and that reversed that was like the change was just dramatic. So that makes total sense, because we see in studies lectins, which are those plant toxins,
Yes.
traveling via the vagus nerve, getting to the brain, specifically the part of the brain that produces dopamine. And that's exactly what happens with Parkinson's. You have a destruction of those dopamine secreting cells in your brain. So
That makes perfect sense. That was a great explanation. I like that.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating because that study came out not too long ago where you can literally see the actual lectin because it was highlighted traveling via the vagus nerve. It was like the first time we had this direct evidence. Yeah, it's really cool. We have another. Thank you, Ali. Ali was telling us about Dr. Anthony Chafee, reminding me of that. Uh, Dorothy, I believe is your name. Opinion on broth and soup.
I've heard people say that if you are sensitive to histamines, that anything that cooks for a really long time, like in a crock pot, is going to tend to have higher histamines. And so a certain portion of the carnivore community may need to be careful about it. I do not do a lot of broths because I feel like my gut it can be good for gut healing. I've heard that lots of times too, but I'm not really there right now. And if I'm hungry enough to sit down and eat, then I'm just going to have some meat. Although right now I do have a friend back before I moved, she lived close to me and she did make me meat broth a lot. And so I would sip on that instead of hot water. And that was much more delicious actually. But yeah, if it works for you, I'm all for it.
You know, now that you mentioned the beverages, do you drink coffee?
Yeah, so I used to drink a lot more. I've done, in 12 and a half years, I've had some years of carnivore. I think I went 2 or 3 years without any coffee or caffeine at all. That worked great. I have had years where I drank a lot of coffee. Honestly, I saw and felt very little difference. The main difference is that sometimes if I overdid it, I felt a little jumpy. Like, I don't know, too much energy, nervous energy is how I would describe it. And now I currently have 1 cup per day, occasionally a second one. Right now I'm drinking water because I've already had my cup this morning. I don't have to get up it wasn't like a huge health decision to cut back on coffee. It was just, I don't have to wake up as early these days anymore. I used to wake up, at one point, 4:30 every morning. And my brain was not ready to get up. And I really did depend on that cup of coffee. I'm sad to say, but it was helpful. And now I don't need that as much.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've cut it out too. So it's been 5 months, 5.5 really, without any caffeine. But for me, I have to do it because I know I've noticed it so many times. It triggers headaches. And in the past 5.5 months, I have not had a headache, which is huge for me because headaches stimulate cravings and it's just difficult to stick to my diet. So I have to not touch it.
Okay.
So
for you, that's great.
Yeah, right.
Where if it's not working, fix it, I don't have headaches, so I drink my cup of coffee per day and, but if I started having headaches or any issues, I've told people that coffee would be the first thing to go.
Right. Yeah. And, it's difficult to make that connection, between the two. Let's see, we have additional questions submitted in the feed here. Let's go back to the top. Yeah. Is it still frozen on your end?
Frozen. In fact, at the top of the screen where it shows how many people are watching, it still says 15. Everything is frozen exactly as it was when I logged on.
Oh, no. We've got 125 people.
Oh, that's fine.
Yes, we're good. Let's see. Okay. What about fasting?
Well, I've heard some evidence for people to say, especially if they've got a severe issue. You had asked me earlier about periodontal disease. And when I looked, some extended fasting has been known to be great for people who have that. No arguments here. I've heard people talk about research when it comes to treating cancer with extended fasting. What I haven't seen yet is contrasting an extreme, total carnivore diet, not for a week, but for some time, to total fasting. And from everything I've seen, there are, in the short term, I'd like to see longer term, but I know that's a big deal. You're going to ask some people to not eat and some people to only eat meat. And so it's going to be tough. I will always choose the meat group, always. But I would like to see, I've always heard there's tons of overlap. As far as how your blood sugar reacts, for most of us, whether you're fasting or not, it's going to be very similar. I don't fast except for, I guess you would call it like accidental intermittent fasting. I'm just not normally hungry from dinner until lunch the next day. So it is intermittent fasting. I could go around snacking during that time. And at times I feel like, oh, maybe I'd like a little food because I like to eat. But I kind of, since I know that's my pattern, I'll sort of just say to myself, you know, it's not lunchtime yet. And it passes. But if I ever end up like gnawingly hungry, I'll just eat. Because I feel like if my body really wants meat, especially if it's just plain meat, it's not, you know, some amazing carnivore casserole cheesy dish or something. I'm just wanting burger patties. I am hungry. You have to be kind of eat a pile of burger patties. So I don't know. I guess the answer, like many things, is if you like doing it or you feel like it's helpful to you to do fasting, I don't have a problem with it, but I also do not feel like it is required for most people to feel really great on a carnivore diet.
Awesome. Susie Wayne says, I've had my MS of 20 years on hold with meat. That's amazing.
Oh, well done. That's awesome.
Yeah. Congratulations, Susie.
Yeah. Way to
Yay.
go.
Let's see. Going back, I have a new one submitted. No, we covered those. Somebody asked, how are you liking retirement? First of all, I had no idea you were retired. Are you?
Okay, well, kind of. In North Carolina, if you teach in public schools for 20 years, you can retire. Not full retirement, but you can. Full retirement takes 30 years. So I had taught over 20 years, and my husband got a new job up here in the mountains, which was 2.5 hours away for us. And at the same time that he got this new job and I hit the 20-year mark, I was doing more carnivore coaching, and I love making videos and working online. And it all just came together to be like, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. So I'm not technically drawing retirement. You can wait and draw it when you're closer to, you know, actual retirement age. But I did kind of retired from public school teaching. How about that? And sometimes people say, do you miss teaching? I'm like, well, no, because I'm teaching every day. You know, I do my carnivore coaching groups, and I still, I'm doing what I was always meant to do. It's just a different subject. It was music, and now it's meat. It's good.
Well, both of them are the most favorite subjects that I'd like to talk about. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I was going to, I was going to say something before I ask you this question. You get so much more impact and influence with YouTube and with what you're doing, and you're reaching so many more people. You're changing lives, you know, and it's just, that's the beauty of the internet. Like, you can reach, there's really no upper limit to how many people you can impact. And so I'm so glad that you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm loving it. I have no idea if this is it for me. For a long time, all I'm doing is like right in this moment, I feel so happy and passionate about what I'm doing. I'm just excited to be able to do it.
Awesome. So Denise is asking you, can you give us some examples of what your kids eat? Thank you so much.
Yeah, so because I was carnivore before I ever had them, I never gave them sugar. So it's really easy. People ask me, how do I get my kids off sugar? I've heard that is really not easy. Much easier to just start them off without it. They don't beg me for it. They don't ask me for it. They've never had it, literally. Now, they've had fruit, so they have technically had sugar in fruit. But they've never had flour, like wheat flour, or we don't do grains. No sugar, no grains. People sometimes hear that diet, no sugar, no grains. That's what my kids do. So they'll have sweet potatoes. And I would allow them, if they wanted to have other vegetables, but they hate most of them. And lucky for them, they have a mom who really doesn't care. If they want some carrots or corn, I'll let them have it. But I'm never like, eat your broccoli. Never. They eat a lot of meat. So when I fix meat in the air fryer for myself, last night I did ribeyes in the air fryer. I did one big one for me. They were thick. This was a big honking ribeye. And then I did another one and chopped it up for the kids. Last night, they had no sides on their plate at all. It was just steak. I had a little bit of chicken. That was their side. It was some chicken that I was needing to get rid of from the fridge. But
Right.
some nights, I'll give them a sweet potato on the side. My husband, he'll have the meat also, but then he'll have a sweet potato and a salad and sometimes something else too. You know, he still eats not quite standard American diet, but definitely more carby than the rest of us do.
Right. What happens when they go to school or, you know, like get invited to a birthday, things like that?
Well, I used to stress over that so much more. So if they were invited to a party, I have a cake. It's a takeoff on a very old recipe called OOPSIE. It used to be OOPSIE bread, and I started making OOPSIE cake. It is not sweetened. It's just eggs, cream cheese, and heavy cream, and a splash of vanilla flavoring. Okay.
Okay.
So it's carnivore cake, but it's really good. And if you've never had sugar or you're way off of sugar, it tastes so good. My kids love it. So I would, for every birthday party they got invited to, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to make another OOPSIE cake. So I would just take a container with their 3 slices of OOPSIE cake in it. When we got to the party, I'd say, go get your plates. They'd go up there, get their party plates so it fit right in. I'd put a slice. They'd sit there and eat it. No one cared. It was fine. Now that they're older, they really don't care. I'll say, do I need to send you like a special something for this party? And they're like, no. Sometimes I still do for the baby because she's the baby. But she's 6. She's not a baby, but she's pampered like one. So sometimes I'll still fix an OOPSIE cake for her. But they really don't care. And at school, I used to send notes to the teacher, you know, no sugar, no grains. But it didn't matter because the teachers are like, but they know, right? I'm like, they know. They know. And at some point, to have some sugar, I will assume at some point in their life they probably will. I have heard, I don't know if it's true, but we're going to find out. I've heard that if you can keep sugar, and I don't know where I read this, but it was years ago and it's stuck in my head. If you can keep kids from having sweets for their first 8 years, it said they will never develop a sweet tooth. We'll see. We'll see. So far, they don't have a sweet tooth, but we haven't also played around with it. But it's not like at year 9, I'm going to be like, okay, here, little buddy.
Let me tell you something funny/sad.
Okay.
I was given condensed milk instead of breast milk for a whole month.
You did what? You had it as a baby or you, yes?
Yes, because I wasn't drinking the formula. So my mom had to leave me with my grandmother for a while. And so that first month where I wasn't being breastfed anymore, I wasn't taking the formula. So they they gave me condensed milk for a whole month.
Gosh, that's like straight like sugar, right? It's so
yeah. I don't know what happened to my brain, but thankfully I'm still here.
It worked out, right?
I think so. I hope so.
In the South, I've heard of people, especially a long time ago, if they're trying to get, I don't know why they did it now that I think about it. If a baby wasn't drinking enough, maybe, they would put Karo syrup in the bottle. Not straight, I'm guessing with the milk, but I remember as a babysitter, parents would say, like, we put a little Karo syrup in their bottle. And I was like, oh, okay, that's normal.
Wow. I cannot believe it. Oh my God. I would be obviously just like you. If I had children, I would do the same. Like no sugar, nothing, you can't touch it because of the struggle that what we have been through with the sugar addiction and everything it leads to. So we're traumatized.
Yeah. When they're making their own money, they can buy what they want, but I'm definitely not going to buy candy for them right now. I feel like, why would I do that when I know what those foods did to me? I don't want to do that to them.
Exactly. Yeah, and you see a lot of parents that are, you can visibly tell they're not healthy, but yet they're still offering this kind of food for their children. And it's like, wow, you know, because you are experiencing the negative effects of that. So why give it to your children, you know?
Yeah,
it's terrible.
I know, I've thought about it too. My parents allowed us to have a lot of sugar growing up. Like at Halloween, we would go trick-or-treating and get massive bags, and we just kept it in our rooms. And we were just allowed to have it. And looking back, I haven't really questioned. My parents are not on Instagram at all. And they're amazing parents. By the way, today is their 49th wedding anniversary, but they won't see this anyway.
Happy anniversary. Tell them I told them so.
Yes, thank you. They were great parents, and I don't know what the disconnect was. Did they just not know? I think they were just fat phobic. We had fat-free everything in the house, and candy didn't have fat, but well, chocolate did. I don't know what they were thinking, actually.
Yeah. It's just, it takes a while for people, especially if they haven't gone through a personal experience or
Yeah.
they're in academia. It takes a while for the general public to really believe the studies, the initial studies that are coming out, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And my mom,
to believe that sugar can be that addictive.
yes. My mom never had a weight struggle, so I think that was probably part of it, is she didn't know what to do with that.
Second, your volume went away completely.
Yours is, how's that?
I got a scam call. I got a scam call. That's what happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you were saying something, but I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I think I was saying my mom had never had a weight struggle at all. So I don't think she really knew what to do about it when I was struggling with weight. Like, okay, well, this is weird. What do we do with that?
Exactly. And it's not an easy one, you know,
Oh,
weight loss is not an easy thing, especially for someone with not direct experience with that.
yeah. And to her credit, though, I hear so many women say that they were kind of traumatized by their mothers putting weight, like, okay, we have to cut back dieting and weight loss and exercise onto their kids to try to fix them. She didn't do
Yeah.
that. So at least there's that. She didn't do that.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I guess you could look at it from that aspect as well. We can talk for hours about that. Thank you so much, Kelly. Kelly, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years and moving forward?
Well, I just started a certification program that I mentioned with Dr. Iflin, and looking at how long it is, I might still be working on that in 5 years. It's a big program, but I'm working on that and enjoying it. I think I started off thinking in my personal journey, it was all about weight, weight, weight. And now I'm so much more fascinated by the addiction side of it, helping people break addiction. So I talk about that a lot in coaching groups. And of course, I find that to be far more successful with people than let's step on the scale and see how much we lost. That's a horrible motivator. So actually having techniques for people to use to break addiction. And I think that's probably where this is headed, is more
That's
of that or that.
amazing. You know, I did my dissertation at UM with addiction on specifically chocolate addiction, but it was really sugar addiction and all that stuff.
Cool.
So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah. Yeah. So do you feel that we missed any important topic that you would like to touch upon or any last message for our audience?
I know that there were a lot of people who want to ask, details because they're already doing carnivore. And so now they're down to like, okay, how much fat? What about iodine? What about this and that? Like the minuscule things. But my overall thing is if you aren't, if you're still having a lot of sugar and carbs and you're struggling, if that's you, I'm having sugar, I'm having processed foods, I'm having carbs, and I'm struggling. And that's a lot of people. They may not be on this live right now, probably not. But if you know somebody like that, oh man, please just try to get started. Whether that's, and it may involve total abstinence for you. And I hope people know, I think it's really important for them to know that they aren't the weirdo here. There are lots of us out here who have to do total abstinence from those trigger foods and to learn to look for the cues that set them off, but mostly just to avoid the foods completely is what a lot of us had to do to ever feel like we weren't losing our minds. And I think sometimes people are afraid to do that because it feels like too restrictive. I posted a quote just, I think this morning, where Dr. Iflin said, if there was a smoker who couldn't moderate cigarettes, had an addiction, right? We would not hesitate at all to say, you need to totally abstain from the cigarettes. You can't handle it. You are addicted. It's bad for you. You've got to get off of it. And we wouldn't say, oh, don't tell them that. That's too restrictive. No, it's what they need to do. And that's what a lot of us have to do too with those sugars and carbs. But it takes getting started and maybe having a really hard couple of weeks, and maybe you need some support, and to just immerse yourself in why this matters. Really focus on why your health in particular needs that. Try to visualize what it is you really want and meditate upon that frequently. Get support from other people or in prayer, whatever you need to do, but it won't stay that hard. So if somebody can put in a really difficult couple of weeks, just like with cigarettes, get it out of your system, you won't be fighting as hard on day 100 as you were on day 10. You really won't. It may never be completely gone from your memory, but it gets so much easier. And I just think sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. And then it gets so much easier is a message that people need to hear, and just start. Just start.
Amazing. So inspiring, Kelly. I'd love to hear you talk about that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I am going to save that live so that we can reshare it later on. And for all of my audience, make sure you follow Kelly Hogan. She is a almost 13 years strict carnivore, thriving with an amazing transformation. Check out her Instagram and just see the amazing transformation that has happened. Over 120 pounds weight loss, but so much more health issues also reversed. It's not just the weight loss. So you are going to love her feed. And yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. And hopefully we talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah. I appreciate you inviting me. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Okay.